to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you remain standing for a moment, please. Heavenly Father, grant us tonight the wisdom and strength to make the best decisions for the future of our fine city. And Lord, bless the folks here tonight to interview for our council positions. Bless them with the ability to express themselves completely. And Lord, take away any nervousness and hesitation that they may have, so they can be at ease with us here tonight, and that will indeed help us in turn in our quest for 2 new council persons. And we ask for all of this tonight in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Kathy, roll when you're ready.
Carter,
Here.
Walther,
Here.
Barstow,
Here.
Pickens,
Here.
Lee,
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum present tonight, and of course the purpose of this meeting is to consider applications for the 2 open council positions, and if necessary, to hold an executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code that consists of considering the appointment of 2 public officials and to fill the 2 vacancies on council. Tonight, our esteemed president, Mr. Todd Woodruff Barstow will be conducting the meeting, so I'll hand the gavel over to him. But I do want to express to both Mr. Barstow and Mr. Hicken, and I'm sure the folks out there appreciate the icebreaker you had tonight to explain the situation on how it's going to work. I'm sure that put them extremely at ease, so thank you to both of you for that. So, Mr. Barstow, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are there any citizen comments? Okay, all right. So, again, as the mayor said, the record should show that Mr. Hicken and I met with all the applicants earlier this evening, went over the ground rules. We've talked about this on council, so I think council's aware we've done this before. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Walther or Mr. Lee, whoever has the envelope, to select the first name. I thank those 2 gentlemen down there at that end of the dais for doing that.
Got one. Mr. Cook.
William Cook. Sir, would you state your name and your address, please, and tell us a little bit about something we should know about you.
William Cook, 419 Oak Meadow Drive here in Pataskala. I thought about this after you suggested we were going to have to do this, and tried to figure out what wasn't on my resume or in the questions that might find interesting. And it dawned on me that my wife and I, back in '99, we both retired. I was on the Whitehall Fire Department and retired from that. My wife was a nurse at Mount Carmel East. She left there. We moved on our boat, and we lived and traveled on our boat for a total of 13 years, to think about it for a minute. Half of that was spent in Nashville because of mitigating circumstances. But we traveled, we left Port Clinton, traveled up under Mackinac Bridge, down the west coast of Michigan, Chicago River, Illinois River, Mississippi River, the Ohio River to Cincinnati. We came all the way up Cincinnati. And then from there, 3 months later, because my son was playing football at Earlham, that's football. Soccer. My son was playing soccer at Earlham University, which is in Richmond. So we were staying actually in Aurora, Indiana, which was an hour drive south of Richmond. Anyway, we went south from there, went all the way to Stuart, Florida, came back, had engine problems and had to spend some time getting the engine fixed and then paying for it. Then we went up the Ohio River to Pittsburgh. So we navigated the entire Ohio River, and we went down and ended up in Pensacola for a winter, and then back to Nashville we were planning on just spending a summer there, but Hurricane Ivan interfered, and we ended up there for actually 7 years. And then we came back, lived in Cincinnati for a couple of years, and then moved back up here to Central Ohio. Basically, it will explain a gap in my resume that you may have noticed or may not have. That was the reason. We decided that retirement is not for old people, it's for young people. So we did it when we were younger and got it in and really enjoyed ourselves. And now we've settled into living in Pataskala, and I decided it might be interesting to be on council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Does any member of council have any questions for Mr. Cook? Mr. Hicken?
I'll ask you one, based on that story. Did you live in Pataskala before you left?
We lived on Blacks Road almost to Outville.
Okay.
We lived there for 16 years, and before that I lived on Beecher Road for a while.
Okay. I think there's another question.
Any other questions? No. Mr. Walther, please.
Have you ever had a chance to run for an elected office?
No,
Okay.
no. As an employee of Whitehall, I could have run out of Whitehall, but I lived in Whitehall for a while.
And probably a bigger question, what type of boat was it?
40-foot trawler.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Your rank at Whitehall when you left?
When I left, I was assistant fire chief. I spent 6 months as acting fire chief after the fire chief had a stroke and couldn't work anymore. So I filled in for him for almost 6 months.
Any other questions? Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I'll just say, and this is for everyone, that most of my questions that I had were addressed in the questionnaire if there's something that pops up. So if I don't ask a question, it's because it got addressed in these, so no offense. But, yeah, everything's in there, so.
Last chance for, Mr. Walther?
Well, I've got a couple. And
Sure. No.
I can ask them both, or?
Go ahead and ask them both, and then I think Ms.
Okay.
Carter?
All right, so.
No? Mr. Hicken? Okay.
Okay.
Andy, please.
You mentioned in those answers, and thank you very much for doing that, that the parks needs its own levy, in your opinion.
Yes.
How do you think the city should go about doing that? You know, what reasons do you think the city should give the public, or at least let the public know, why the city needs a levy for parks specifically?
Well, the parks presently are being paid for, financed out of the budget, the city budget, and I've seen in other political subdivisions that the parks sometimes have their own levy, and it just seemed to make sense to me that the parks have their own levy so they can better budget and not take out of the city's budget too.
Do you think the parks need to be improved? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, do you think there should be better parks? Do you think there should be more activities in the parks? Levies are on there for reasons, to supply funds for certain things. I understand taking it out of the budget. Trust me, I fully understand that. But is there specific items within the parks that you would like to see?
Well, a lot of days, I haven't been this winter because I'm suddenly decided I don't like the cold, but I walk through the park over behind the house almost every day, and I see what goes on there. Improvements, the discussion Monday night about the fees for the use of the parks and everything, I found that interesting. I was going to read the ordinance, and I didn't get a chance. But I was just curious as to, why that ordinance is being done. Well, now it's tabled, but and I just think that the parks need the money, and that general improvement. Well, first of all, maintenance, just normal maintenance. Those parks eat up a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. But they're also a big asset to the city, and I am very in favor of a levy for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, my last question would be, in that questionnaire, that same questionnaire, you talked in the development section of your answers, you advocated that or talked about Pataskala bringing in industry and business. My question would be, would you be in favor of abatements to entice them in?
That's a double-edged sword.
Sure.
And certainly, well, if you abate the property taxes, not including the, of course, school tax, then you still got the income tax from the people that work there. But you know, it's what does it take to get a specific business, whatever, in here to commit to coming into Pataskla? And I think those are what's the word I'm looking for? Those are enticements that can be taken or given away as whoever is involved in it sees fit. But yes, I think they are necessary and can be a great enticement to get the businesses in here.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay,
Walter,
I'm going
okay,
to follow
no.
up on that because Tim had that right where I was going with that. I saw in your answer your comment about Pataskla being not being a bedroom community for Etna and Jersey Township, and I wondered what steps council could take, what you would suggest council should take to avoid that. I mean, is it potentially investments in infrastructure? Is it potentially advertisement? Should we go out and market the sites ourselves? What would be your suggestions?
A development department to go out and literally hunt for people, yes. I think that would probably be a good idea, a workable idea. The abatements, the idea of the abatements, but also to limit the residential units being built in the city. As I said in the questionnaire, the schools are getting killed. I mean, literally. I mean, and it's been going on. I mean, I can remember back when a certain member of council was in school, and because I had 4 go through the system, through the whole system, and it seemed like constantly fighting. In fact, my daughter, back in back in the 80s, my daughter wrote the Warrior Weekly for the Standard for Tom, and she attended a board meeting, and the board had voted to stop busing. And one comment that I remember from that was, she wrote in there, she says, the Board of Education is the Board of Education, not the Board of Busing. And I thought that just really said a lot right there. But the point I'm trying to make is very simple, that the schools are being definitely overtaxed. I mean, the 2 schools under construction now, when they're finished, they're going to be full or overfull. And I'm scratching my head going. But I realize that the council has nothing over that. But, you know, it's the schools. But the council can, in my opinion, limit the housing units, therefore hopefully giving the schools a break.
So just to clarify on your answer so I can understand, do you believe that council should invest in a development, either a development specialist on staff or through a consultant to go out there and actively work on getting commercial and industrial through the zoning, permitted zoning areas? To do that now, are we at that point where you feel that that's necessary?
Yes. Standing up here right now, yes.
Understand. With the information you have right now, from your viewpoint, that's
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
Not a question. I just like to say, your service on the Firefighters Association and what that brings to the community with the street fair. We appreciate that very, very much. I noticed that on your resume, and I want to point it out.
It's a fun thing for me.
Yeah.
And it keeps my finger in the pot, so to
Yeah.
speak.
That's a big thing for the city. Thank you for that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Cook? Mr. Cook, I want to thank you very much for your time. Please have a seat, and now you get to watch. Okay, all right, so,
You pick this one.
guys, I think we're going to argue about who's going to pick it. Oh, geez.
Over there.
Yeah.
All right, Dustin Epperson.
All right, Mr. Epperson. You need to state your name and address, please, and then give us a little intro.
Dustin Epperson, 2109 West Gardenia Drive, Pataskla, Ohio. As Mr. Cook said, most of my information is in my resume and subsequent questions and answers. Something about me that isn't in there, I have 4 kids. 4 kids that span the age of 15 down to 5. I have a freshman all the way down to a kindergartner. In between, I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. And we're heavily active in this community. We enjoy this community. We've been in this community since 2013. It's just, I don't see where else we could live in the Central Ohio region. I really don't. It's become part of our family, and we're glad to be here. Prior to that, as you guys might see, I was enlisted in the military. Served 6 years. Was stationed in Florida, Panhandle of Florida. It was a rough gig in Destin, Florida. Was there for a year. Then after that, moved to North Carolina, where I served the rest of my enlistment there when we weren't deploying or doing other things. So probably have the only son in Pataskala that's blown up some C4. So that's probably something unique that he gets to talk about.
Don't be so sure.
I think I heard that. You live right behind me.
Prior to this, I grew up down around Cincinnati, Dayton area in Middletown. In my sophomore year, we moved to Trenton, Ohio, which is roughly the same size as Pataskala. However, I wouldn't bring my family back to Trenton when I had the opportunity. I just didn't like how the course of the town went, what was going on there. And for good reason now that there's a large opioid crisis right now and a lot of other issues that I would like to avoid and see not happen here in Pataskala. So that is one of the reasons why I would like the opportunity to be on council. I currently serve on the Planning and Zoning Board, so I'm very familiar with the developmental issues that the city is facing. And I am appreciative of the fact that we are working on design guidelines or wanting to engage the design guidelines, as well as the fees for developing an area to help boost the infrastructure. Infrastructure with the explosive growth is taking a beating, and it will continue to take a beating. And we should be proud that people want to move here, and I'm not against people wanting to move here, but I do believe it needs to be paced. And the moratorium has provided some of that strain relief, so to speak, so we can get some of these guidelines and fees in place, so that we can get the commissions, we can get the council, we can get the administration on kind of the offensive when it comes to development, rather than being reactive. So I'd like to be part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Epperson. Any questions for Mr. Epperson?
Actually, I got one quick one.
Yes, sir.
In your number one issue that you cited was very similar to what you just said right there. It talked about how the growth is beginning to outpace the city's abilities to improve its roads. So, and you just talked right there about the moratorium. Is there anything else you would identify that would help us, or that you might bring up to council to help with that?
Well, developers are going to come in and pitch their pitches. Generally, it starts at the zoning commission, and in my experience, they've come in just wanting to cram and cluster homes, which then increases the personnel and residents and citizens that live there, which then in turn increases the strain on the infrastructure, the strain on the schools. So any support for the zoning commission for not approving any clustered developments would be beneficial. If a neighborhood or an area is zoned a certain zoning, just because cluster is an option doesn't mean it needs to be approved right away. So support on that would be great, yes.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Walther?
Yep. You've talked about the roads and the different things. Obviously, one of the ways to help with that is economic development, besides the rooftops. How would you suggest the city go about improving their efforts to do economic development?
Economic development would be a great relief for the city. You will get the tax increase, you'll get the income tax increase, and you'll pull that business in. To go about that, and listening to Mr. Cook's answers with a similar question, I do believe that maybe a consultant and/or a member of staff that is actively going out and recruiting development for Pataskala, pitching Pataskala, would be an excellent idea.
Okay.
Oh, Mrs. Carter.
You're not used to me being quiet, are you?
No, I was getting worried there for a minute.
Dustin, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but I too was in the Air Force, so good choice. And also served at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, which isn't a commonly served base. It's not a lot of place. It's not a place a lot of people go, so it's weird. And I'm also familiar with Middletown and from that area, so it's a little ironic. Just had to bring that up. But my question for you is, you talked about cluster housing and development. What do you think about multi-unit family homes, apartments or condos? I mean, we've, done a lot of work lately, and everything that we see shows that the demand is going to be for lifestyle type of housing. And, we also have a need for affordable housing, and we also have seniors who won't be able to maintain single-family homes forever and want to move into decent apartments. So for this area, what is your outlook on that?
I do believe Pataskala needs to be an opportunity for many people to live here, just like you said, a lifestyle community. Not everybody wants a house, and some people don't want the yard maintenance, and they don't want the other things. But as with housing, I think it needs to be paced. I think there's appropriate areas in the town where it would be beneficial, where the infrastructure may already be there, or will not be as strained as in other areas. Anytime there's additional residential, there's going to be strains on the schools. I don't know if we can get around that, short of letting it run its course. But yes, I'm not against multi-residential communities. I do think that they have a place, and I do think that some people want to live there, and there's absolutely no problem with that. But like with all growth, residential growth, I think it needs to be paced.
Mr. Walther.
Have you had a chance to potentially review our city's disaster preparedness plan?
I have not.
Okay. Well, there's not much to it at this point. So I was hopeful that you may have looked at that and had any comments, because it's one of the items that I think needs substantial improvement and substantial work on it. I noticed through your resume you have that background to do that. Have you, when you were in the military, obviously, are you proficient with disaster preparedness plans?
I have a lot of FEMA training, which is requirement for both when I was in the military and in my current position with DHS. I do have some experience with that, maybe not so much as, say, law enforcement and or firefighting, but I do have conversations with folks. We are, my current position, we get to talk to all of the first responder elements within and around Central Ohio. We do a lot of training with them, so there is a lot of coordination and a lot of resources that I could tap into to answer some questions or get questions answered for myself.
Great.
Mr. Lee.
Yeah, much like Mr. Cook, I see all your volunteering on here and appreciate that, especially the watchdogs. I know that's a cool thing. That's a cool thing for the kids. My question's real simple. You mentioned the moratorium and you being on planning and zoning. What's your, obviously we know how we feel at the council level with the moratorium. I'm just kind of curious. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Just from the planning and zoning, did it help make that? Did it relief? Was there any relief on that board from an application, or was there any pros and cons that you guys saw at your level on that commission? Just an overall take on the moratorium.
Relief, maybe it's just the way that developers have came in and wanted to address the commission. We did have some come in afterwards, but I think they already had their information in before the moratorium came into place. I believe it was voted on and it was turned down. It was the Summit Road project that they wanted to do on Summit Road, just north of Cleveland. But since then, we haven't had any neighborhood and/or residential development issues, which has been actually really nice because it's afforded us the opportunity to look at other things like the design guidelines and some other resolutions that the city's been wanting to do. So.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. What's your view on on impact fees? It's been
I think it's, as you can see, I think roads and infrastructure is a big issue within the city. So impact fees will help alleviate some of the burden on the city in financing that. Yeah, for example, a neighborhood is planning to go in across from 84 Lumber, right down the street here. That's going to greatly impact the Columbia intersection there and feeding into the city from that point. So I think a lot of our intersections, Summit Road, intersection, even going further out into the Watkins intersection, there's a lot of work that can be done, probably needs to be done, to make those areas not only safer, but more functional for the city.
Thank you. Mrs. Carter?
The council seats that are available are both at-large, which would have you not just a voice for one area, but for the city in its entirety. So what would you do to reach out the areas that you don't commonly travel or the side of town that you don't live in to find out, how would you get in touch with them and stay apprised of the issues and concerns that were going on?
It's a great question. I actually thought of that myself a couple days ago for that opportunity, if afforded that opportunity. But number one, I'd probably start with social media. Facebook, the town loves their Facebook and their Pataskala page. So that would be my number one place to start, introduce myself, explain who I am, explain my background, and let them know that I am a voice for Pataskala, not just one section or one ward. So that would be my number one place to start. And then probably I would ask them. I would say, you know, is this a great way to get in touch? Does anyone have any other recommendations on ways to get in touch? And try to tap into some of that just community within Pataskala.
I have a question.
Mr. Mayor?
Knowing that you have a family and a job and all that good stuff, and of course, Tommy Lee reached out and told Mr. Cook how much he appreciated him working on at the street fair. Do you have the time for extracurricular activities like the Easter egg hunt and the power show and the street fair and the fireworks?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Mr. Walter had, go ahead, Andy, please.
Yeah, I've got a couple. You know, you had answered in your questionnaire that roads were your first, at least as far as the out of $100, what you would value, and it was substantially more than the police. Can you give me, you've already answered a little bit about how you think the roads are lacking in behind the development. Is it fair to say that if the income tax, I'm going to ask this in a certain way, if the income tax were to pass, and the income tax increase were to pass, how would you view spending that extra money? Would you feel that roads would be more important than police, or vice versa?
Understanding the way that the law enforcement is financed in the city, I 100% support what it would go to with law enforcement.
Okay, 'cause I don't know if this would surprise you or not, but right now, the police are funded with about 55% of the income tax. And roads are funded with less, obviously. And with roads being your number one, I just wanted to see where you felt with, how you felt with that percentage being opposite of what your answer had shown.
In the ranking of those, 1 through 3, I could put them all at 1 on my page.
Fair enough.
But with the way that would be with the law enforcement, I understand we're having a growing issue encroaching from Columbus and surrounding areas, especially with car break-ins and walking around neighborhoods, pulling handles, things like that. It's my understanding that generally there's only 3 officers on duty at a time. So with the town and city our size, we probably need double that. So I understand the need for the money. So I wouldn't have an issue with that.
We have one more.
Sure, Ian, no,
All right?
please,
All
of
right.
course.
So I've got one more for you. And just doing some research, I found that you're a hunter as a hobby.
I do hunt when I have
Okay.
time, yes, sir.
So the city has a discharge zone.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you're familiar with that, being on planning and zoning. And sometimes developments in the discharge zone have conflict. Development of houses or development of commercial entities have conflict with that discharge zone. How would you propose to resolve that conflict between an area that is currently in a discharge zone and an area that builds next to a discharge zone?
Kind of have some unique experience with the neighborhood I live in. We had an incident where a stray round, allegedly stray round, came into the neighborhood, struck a vehicle. And the HOA put forth concern to council, to Representative, or to Councilman Lee. And it is determined that it widened the area. The property is around it now became non-discharge zones. Obviously, I think that discussion needs to be had with both sides of that party. The people that have been here, and they've had their property, they've done their things on their property legally, they've been allowed to do for decades and years. So I do think the opportunity to have that discussion with them and, say, a neighborhood that comes in that may not want the discharge zone close to them. Part of me is of the mindset of when you move into an area, you should do your homework in the areas that you're moving into, whether it's zoning in properties that border you or your neighborhood, or what is and isn't allowed on those properties. I don't think that it should just be arbitrary to take away something that somebody's done, probably their whole life on their property. But I also think that with a growing city, that discussion needs to be had. If the property owners that will be losing their discharge zone are okay with it, by all means, go for
Right,
it.
voluntarily
Yeah.
give up the discharge zone, correct. But when there is that issue where the property won't or doesn't want to voluntarily give up that discharge zone, given that we use the word zone, it's not really a zoning per se, but if they don't want to, how would you resolve that?
It would depend on how the discussion goes, in my opinion. I would want to hear the concerns on both sides. Maybe there can be an agreement as far as we're not shooting this direction, we'll shoot these times, if that may be the case, just hypothetically speaking. But it would depend on how that instruction goes. But if you have somebody that's stern and they want to shoot and their backdrop is the neighborhood and they're not willing to change and or budge, then some thought needs to be had to that as to whether the discharge zones may need to be pushed further away from that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Epperson? Okay, Mr. Epperson, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank
Great.
Mel, Tim, do you guys want to?
Nope.
Shot at kids.
Down there is fine.
just
You
trying to
can
be-
choose
You
the.
can see how much fun you two are having with this.
Mr.
We're
Truex.
easily amused.
Okay, Jerry Truex. So, Mr. Truex, just let us name and address, and then give us a little intro.
For my mom, I'll do Gerald Allen Truex, 178 International Drive, Pataska, Ohio, 43062.
Very good.
A little bit about myself. I have 4 kids and soon to be 8 grandkids. Married my childhood sweetheart. We went to school at Watkins together. I moved down to Lancaster for about 15 years. Was getting a little closer to work, and then moved back after both of our parents started getting older. We just felt it was good to move back and help take care of them. I grew up, my grandfather's farm was the Etna Industrial Park, part of the Etna Industrial Park, way before it was sold, to what it is now. My parents' house still sits right in the middle. It's the only house still sitting on the property. We sold it about a year and a half ago after my mom passed away. All my kids live in this area. We're all my brothers and sisters, except for one, live in this area still. We've grown up here, spent our whole life in this area. I I am an avid outdoorsman too. I like to hunt and fish and boat.
Okay, questions for Mr. Truex? Mr. Hicken?
I noticed you work for Cooper
Yes, sir.
Enterprise. What do they do?
Cooper Enterprises, we do wood components, parts, and fixtures. So we do everything just like in here, or we do fast food, woodworking, you name it. We do high rises, we do the apartment complexes. It's just a large wood shop on steroids, basically. We have 150,000 square feet of machinery, and we cut and build parts.
And I've got your resume on my computer. You also serve on planning.
Planning and zoning for 10 years, yes, sir.
So I wanted to make sure that everybody heard that. So that's good for me.
Any other questions? Mr. Walter?
With fewer and fewer people subscribing to the local papers, how would you suggest the city communicate and provide information to the public, both information about what the city's doing or thinking about doing planning-wise, or at least letting the city know status of budgets and so forth? How should the city communicate better to the community?
I think our webpage could do a little bit more updating on that type of information. Sometimes when you get onto our city website, it's kind of outdated, a lot of the information. Number two, I did a lot of traveling for a long period of time, and it was amazing when you'd go into a town and the first thing that would pop up was the city on the TV screen. I kind of missed that when we used to have that, because that was something that kept people, there was just a page. I understand that there's
You're talking about
cost to that,
the local cable.
Yes, sir.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
Yep, there's a cost to that. The newsletter, I love. That's another way that we could still get things to people. If we could get their, again, everybody's doing things with their phones anymore and their computers. So is there a way, too, that, we could do a computerized, page that got to people? Yeah.
Can I follow up on that, Tom?
Sure, no, yeah,
So,
please.
do you feel that, given a limited budget, and I know this wasn't anywhere in the questions as far as, there's many things to spend money on, obviously. How would you rank that as importance to the community from council's viewpoint? If you're on council, how important do you think that would be to have that information out to the community?
I think it's very important. Plus, I think when businesses come in to see, or if we have a development person that actually does that, they can show that kind of information is going out to the people. That only builds unity within the community. When people don't know what's going on is when people become very disappointed or upset or surprised. Surprise is never a good thing for anybody.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Just generally speaking, what's your take, what's your opinion of the moratorium?
I love it. It has given us, as Dustin said, it's given us a chance to take a breath and look at other things. Eventually, the one thing we have to look at down the road is, I've always been a big believer, if you look at Pickerington or if you look at New Albany, if you build it, it will come. So with the roads, just like with Pickerington and everything, I mean, we can put that moratorium on there, but eventually, if the city doesn't grow, then other prosperities won't come.
Fair enough. And thank you for your time on that board. I do have to ding you a little bit for putting Odell Jackson in here, though.
It wasn't my choice. It was Joe Alt's
I'm
choice.
kidding. He's a great person. I'm kidding.
I know.
No, thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Carter?
How often do you travel the west side of town?
To
the west
well,
side of town?
I officiated high school football and girls softball for years,
Okay.
so I spent a lot of time on the west side of town. I try to get out and drive around all the time, especially since I'm seeing customers locally and things like that. So I go to games at Licking Heights and things like that. We're all one big community now, so we all have to, I try to get out and we go to that side of town to eat and things like that.
Okay. Where do you see the biggest traffic issue?
Well, as I said before in my notes, we have two main arteries that come through, 16 and 310. And when those start getting backed up, everybody starts going to those secondary streets, Refugee Road, or you name it. I mean, everybody starts jumping around the secondary streets. So if we could get those main arteries wider and moving smoother, we could eliminate people jumping and going through communities and causing all kinds of havoc elsewhere.
So you would be in favor of a widening of Broad Street from the county line at Franklin County, Taylor Road to where? Going east?
Going east?
Where would it stop?
Well, I mean, it would probably stop at our line. I know I'd love to work with the state and the county to try to extend it beyond.
Our eastern line, our eastern border.
Our eastern border?
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, it's one of those things that if you look at the other surrounding communities that have grown successfully and still had pains, if you build it, they will come.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Truex? Once, twice. Okay, Mr. Truex, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Okay. You're having so much fun with that. Your turn.
Yeah, we did, don't we?
All right, Andrew Rowan, please.
Hi, Mr. Rowan. Name and address, please, and give us a little intro. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Barstow, members of council, my name is Andrew Rowan. I am reside at 266 Stone Mass Loop here in Pataskala. First of all, I want to thank you all for this opportunity, recognizing that the position you are attempting to fill tonight is a weighty one, and whoever is selected, fortunately for us, as you have mentioned previously, we have a great group of candidates out here tonight. I did have the opportunity to review the resumes and other information that was posted on the city page leading up to this evening, and I am, frankly, if I'm not picked, I won't feel too terrible about who my representatives are. So this is a great group of folks. I moved to Pataskala nearly 5 years ago, along with my wife and our young daughter, who at that time was just about to turn 2 years old. 2 weeks after we moved into Pataskala, we held her second birthday party in our home that was still in boxes. I'm not sure about the wisdom behind that, but it went off without much of a hitch. Since that time, I have had a young son who is now 16 months old. My daughter has entered into school age and is now in first grade in the Licking Heights School District. I have graduated from law school, practiced for 13 months out in Licking County Prosecutor's Office in the juvenile division, handling juvenile crimes as well as child protective services issues here in Licking County. I've recently started a new job working for the State Department of Agriculture as an associate staff attorney there. Doing everything from code writing to responding to public records requests and those types of things. During my time as assistant prosecutor, I obviously had the opportunity to work with officers and detectives from the city of Pataskala, most predominantly, as I was mentioning to the officer here today, most predominantly I worked with Detective Sergeant Gary Smith and Detective Wiles as well, and having had multiple conversations with them about our city and what they were seeing and what their concerns were. At one point, one of those gentlemen mentioned to me that our city had been termed Little Whitehall, which terrified me. I'm familiar with when I was looking for places to live when I first moved to Columbus nearly 8 years ago now, that Whitehall was one of the areas that I looked at and decided I never wanted to live there. Because of the crime and the various things along that line that made me simply feel unsafe in particular neighborhoods of that city. And if my city that I had chosen to live in and that I had chosen to raise my family in and I wanted my kids to grow up in was being termed as a little Whitehall, I knew something had to change. I'm seriously concerned that this town could become crime-ridden as many other small towns around Columbus have as Columbus has expanded. It's my desire to work with all of you to build upon what is already in place, to ensure that the values that this small town has stay in effect. I have taken the time to read our city charter as well as the comprehensive plan and peruse our city ordinances. I'm aware of the issues that we're facing with our park funding and our desire to work with recreational sports leagues to allow them to be able to participate at our local fields as opposed to having to go elsewhere. I'm aware of the importance of having recreational sports leagues. My daughter participates in one, and as a county prosecutor in the juvenile division, I can assure you that if we do not have outlets such as recreational sports leagues for children to participate in and we leave them to their own devices, professionally speaking, I can tell you that doesn't turn out too terribly well. I want to serve this community as a shining example to my own children as well as the citizens here of what representative government is, what it means to serve. I think the comprehensive plan framework says it best, that our community identity is one that embraces and connects people to small town values, open spaces, and the rural lifestyle. I hope that you will allow me this opportunity, and I am open to your questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rowan?
Just a quick one. Right out here at the Ag on 40, is that where you're based?
Sir.
Any questions for Mr. Rowan? Mrs. Carter?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. So, one of my challenges that I often face on council is that I don't have some other people who travel the west side roads as much as I do.
Sure.
So to give another perspective, something that, you know, maybe I'm not seeing that somebody else would see, am I representing everybody the way I should be, so on and so forth. What would you recommend? One of the biggest issues that I've heard is, you know, we don't have really a town center on the west side. We're for a gathering place or, you know, not a coffee shop or something like that. What would you see that we could do better over there to create community?
Sure, absolutely. As I was reviewing the comprehensive plan and I was reading what it was talking about, a city center or a gathering place as was part of what they were recommending throughout that process, my immediate thought was, man, do you know how much my kids love to go to Creekside and Gahanna? They love it. My daughter loves to go to Cold Stone and get ice cream and then go walk around Little Creek area there and feed ducks or whatever, although they've recently told us to stop doing that. That's another issue entirely.
No.
Apparently bread's bad for ducks. So as I was looking at that, I said, man, if we could have something along those lines where Creekside consists of 5-6 restaurants. I believe there's even a bar across the street, as well as then an ice cream shop and a walking path. It's not like a crazy thing to build, but it was very smart. It gives families choices on what they want to do, where they want to eat, what their experience will be that evening, and then to be outside and to get some exercise. Again, if you have children, you understand that getting your children outside and allowing them fresh air and to get their energy out is invaluable. As my wife who is a stay-at-home mother, is learning now that my son, who has been cooped up inside during these cold days, is going crazy. And so the other day when it was all of, 45 degrees outside, she's like, we're going outside. So those opportunities, that type of environment could easily, I believe, be put into place on the west side. And I believe a developer would be willing to foot most of the cost if he was able to recoup his expenses by either leasing out or selling out those spaces.
Oh, Mr. Walter, questions?
Go ahead.
You had mentioned the comprehensive plan. Are you referring to the draft comprehensive plan or the existing comprehensive plan?
I was looking at the draft comprehensive plan as I was, and I'll refer to what another gentleman had said. I was researching, trying to find the existing comprehensive plan, and I wasn't able to find that on the website. Now, that may have been my own lack of familiarity with the website. What I found instead was the draft. So I recognized that what I was operating out of was the draft version, although I presume that it being the January 2019 draft version, there wasn't a terrible amount of disparity between those two items.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
There's probably a pretty good
Okay, fair
difference
enough.
between the two, but that's
Fair
okay. When you were looking through that and reading it, that being it's a draft,
Yes.
it's going to be reviewed by this council.
Of
It's
course.
going to, I would assume, essentially, eventually be approved. But it has a draft connotation. So there are things to change in there, or potentially change in there. What items would you see in there that may or may not fit with a future community as a comprehensive plan is a guideline for the development in the community? What things in there would you see that might not fit the Pataskala future?
Sure. As I was reading through it, the draft called for or recommended some fairly extensive areas that we could grow into industry. I do not deny that businesses are necessary and that they will, as I mentioned, the restaurants, that type of gathering place, those businesses I believe are necessary to our future. And some limited industry perhaps could work in our community. I worry, though, at the amount that draft version had envisioned. Several thousands of acres, if I remember correctly, the number that it had said. And when it referred to industry, my understanding of that was effectively the Facebook building on Beach Road. Or something of that nature, which, as I drive by it, makes me want to vomit every single time because it's not what I want to see when I'm driving along the road. I don't want my community to become that, and so I don't want our city to turn into that. Now, if it's at the outskirts of the city, is that a problem? Maybe do we relegate them to the edges where we're not seeing them as we drive right down Broad Street or up 310? Perhaps that's the answer then. But that would have been my number one concern with the way that was drafted.
So given that, we have a JRS site. Do you mind if I follow up?
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
We have a JRS site, and that has an M1 connotation for zoning, which would allow exactly that. That's not only in the previous comprehensive plan, but it's in the current comprehensive plan. There are necessary evils in the world.
Absolutely.
I'm not a big Facebook fan, so I'll go on record to say that. But a building such as that has very little traffic and has very few employees, but the way it's structured to pay taxes is enormous. Knowing, I do have knowledge of what they pay per year to the city of New Albany, and that would, it's a substantial amount per building. Given that, and you said on the outskirts, is there other areas that you would see in Pataskala that might be reasonable, that the comprehensive plan would then be, being that it's draft, that it would be a comment that you would make to say, this would be a better area for something like that versus maybe what's shown in the comprehensive plan now? And I don't know that you've studied it that far.
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly what the comprehensive plan, where exactly those locations were. I would say, just out as my own personal opinion, as near to our 161 border as we could get, that area tending to be more of a, lots of vehicles are traveling through there because of the 161 corridor coming through there. Not necessarily, although there is residential area up there, it would not be, I don't believe, out of this, world to say that, that's the outer edges of where we are, that wouldn't be an appropriate place to put something like that. As you said, necessary evils. At the end of the day, a city is a small business, and you have to have money to run your business. I fully support the police department. I want the police department to grow to protect our citizens. They can't do that without money. And so whatever means that takes, whether it be a levy, whether it be more income taxes because of buildings like that, perhaps, as you said, necessary evil. But I would, again, push it out away from our more condensed residential areas.
And I just want to go on record. I don't want anybody to quote me as saying that that building is a necessary evil. I'm saying that
No.
that there are things in the world that we
Off the
don't like.
record, sir.
There are things in the world that we don't like necessarily.
Yes, sir.
But you know, as you said, we're faced with the choice of either the residents footing the bill.
Yes.
On the backs of the residents, either via income tax or increased income tax, or we find other avenues, and other avenues include things such as that building. So that's all. I just want to make sure I'm on the record there.
Absolutely, sir.
Thanks.
And Mr. Walther, thank you, because you have to remember that, folks, the Fourth Estate is here almost every meeting, so careful what you say.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Lee had some questions.
Yeah, I just have one for you. I noticed in your questionnaire that in the volunteering question on number 2 that you said you do most of your volunteering at your church. You said as you know you get more involved in the community and you anticipate transitioning that volunteer work towards the community. Just give us a couple examples of some local organizations that civic groups that you feel like that you would want to transition that to.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I believe in my questionnaire, my daughter is now, for the first year, Girl Scout cookies, yay. That started yesterday. I can't wait to get out in full force with that. So I imagine there will be some volunteering along with the Girl Scouts of America organization, local chapters here that I will get involved with. As well as she does, again, participate in recreational sports, as I mentioned before, so the Licking Heights Youth Athletic Association. I have full intention of volunteering with them next year to coach her team. And so I would anticipate those two in particular growing further. In terms of other organizations, I off the top of my head, I cannot name another organization here, but I do anticipate that I will be out and involved. Sorry, allow me to address something else because it's going to be related to what you're saying.
Sure, go ahead.
My time over the last 5 years has been strapped. I went to law school part-time in the evenings while working 60 hours a week and having a family and maintaining a home and et cetera, and graduated with honors from law school. I currently work in 2 different jobs. I currently work not only for the State Department of Agriculture, but as my resume reflects, I currently work part-time on the weekends at Amazon and OBETS, which is a position that I'm dropping very soon, and I'm very excited about that. But my time commitment has been, crazy. And as such, because of those restrictions on my time, I've not had the opportunity to come out to our local street fairs. I've not had time to come out, opportunity to come out to various events, as the mayor was mentioning, the things that the Easter egg hunts and things of that nature, as much as I would like to. My daughter is very much wanting to be involved because all of her friends are involved in those things, and they know about all those events going on. And so I would anticipate that as my time will actually be freeing up here, even if added to this council, I will actually be gaining free time here very shortly, that I would be more involved in those types of events.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Ms. Carter? You can, no? Mr. Walters? Okay.
You know, I'm gonna congratulate you on that. I did the exact same thing. I did night school at Capitol. I worked. I have my own company. That kind of stuff. It is. You don't watch much TV.
No.
Like
sir.
any. So I fully understand that, and it's amazing how much time you have on your hands after you get out of law school.
Yes,
Although young kids take that up too.
Right.
Have you ever run for an elected office before?
Not a publicly elected office, no.
Okay.
I've been involved in student governments, but
Okay, as Mrs. Carter was mentioning, this is an at-large position, so it's all of Pataskala, and that takes on quite a burden. So in 2 years, regardless of which seat this is, in 2 years that will come up. I noticed that you had mentioned you would like to do that again, to serve again if you were appointed to run for that seat. How would you allocate your time to do that. It takes quite a bit of work, as anybody that's run for at-large knows. It takes quite a bit of work to cover or canvass the city of Pataskala. It's huge.
Absolutely. Well, I can first say that although I have not personally run, I've been involved in political campaigns, I don't know, since I was 16 or so, volunteering, driving throughout, knocking on doors for various candidates, judicial candidates, things of that nature. And so I am aware of the great swaths of property that you are required to cover. And so I'm no stranger to spending my weekends going door to door in a neighborhood that I'm not familiar with. And so I believe that would be my intention, would then to be, although I live on the far western edge of our city, my children's pediatrician is here in town at Licking Heights Pediatrics. And so I do come into town somewhat often because children are almost always finding another way to injure themselves or be sick. I think that I would not have an issue at all spreading myself out throughout the election period into new neighborhoods of Pataskala that I've not yet had contact with, and introducing myself and knocking on the doors as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hicken.
One last question from me is, I looked at your answer. You obviously have experience with our police department. One of the end of one of your answers talked about how the measured growth, you would keep an eye on measured growth and how it would interact with the police force. And as we are getting bigger, obviously, I think everybody that's here tonight knows, there is a levy coming up for the police department. Gut feeling for you, what would you say the number of police we would need to patrol Pataskala would be? And if you don't know, you don't know.
I can't give you a number, but what I can tell you is that in my conversations with Detective Sergeant Smith, he informed me that we are operating currently with the same number of officers that we had when we were half this size. So I will tell you, although I don't know exactly what that number is because I can't keep track of how many officers walk through my office as a prosecutor, but it needs more than doubled because we cannot double it and then continue to grow, because then we would have to go through this process again. So in order to maintain ahead of the curve instead of playing catch-up, we would need to more than double the current police force.
Wasn't looking for a gotcha question. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Rowan? No? Okay, Mr. Rowan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Ms. Ashbrook.
I'm sorry, the mayor was yakking. I'm sorry.
Ashbrook.
Ms. Ashbrook.
Come on, Mayor. Stop yakking.
Hi, just let us know your name and your address, please.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Ashbrook. Live at 159 Granville Street in Pataskala. You've all got my questions, my answers to my questions, my resume and things. A couple of things that I guess I neglected to put on there is my husband and I have both been very active in this community as well as in the government and just volunteering in other organizations. We have, I was part of I was a treasurer for the income tax pact that was formed to get the first income tax passed. Worked very hard on trying to get that passed. It took a couple times, but eventually we worked out a deal and got that. So I'm familiar with how that has to happen and things like that. Was on the Parks Advisory Board at this point. Very familiar with the parks and things. I do travel around and visit those parks at least once a week, and have since I've been on the park. That includes all of them, and then the new one that should be coming online soon. Have a number of issues that I think that the city has to have a tax base, and we've got to do economic development to do that. We have to have someone that's constantly pushing Pataskala. This is a great city. We all need to believe in our city, and I believe completely in this city. I have run for city office in the past, ran against Pat Sager a number of years ago, and I lost by 11 votes. But so I'm very interested in helping guide the city the best I can.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Ashbrook? Mr. Lee?
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for all the service you've done in the community. I know how active you guys are in the Lions Club and all those things, Cookie Walk, so I just wanted to thank you for that.
Mr. Hicken?
Well, I have two things. Number one, you said you used to be on the Parks Board. Let's hope that I realized that.
We had a little snafu there, I guess. I've been there 15 years.
But with that said, I also want to say, as I looked at your rankings, it wasn't just all parks number one. So you kind of get a little bit of credit there from me because while I love them, I think there's a wide variety of stuff that's happening in the city. One of the things you just mentioned there was bringing in a company to improve the tax base. Can you give me maybe an idea off the top of your head about something you would do to make that happen, or suggest?
We just need to promote the properties that we have there that are zoned more like manufacturing and things so that we can bring in those kind of companies.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Mr. Walther?
Yep. Jenny, I'm going to say this also. I know I'm going to echo Tommy. Thank you for all your help. I know through the time that the parks, the dark times of the parks, you were very instrumental in that, as well as Dwayne, so thank you very much. Saying that, you've been on the park board, this is going to sound kind of bad, actually, for a very long time. You've been on the park board since Reagan Parsons was administrator, city administrator, and so you've seen several administrators since. As you know, the city has begun a search for a replacement for Mr. King. With that in mind, and based on your past experience with the city administrators, what two qualities would you look for as a council person? What two qualities would you look for as very important qualities for our next administrator?
I would hope that we could bring an applicant that has a lot of experience in growing a city in more economic development. I think that we have to move away from more housetops, rooftops and things, and I would hope that we could bring someone in that would be more familiar and have that background.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. What would be a second item as far as with the growing community? What other items might be important for an administrator to be ready to face in Pataskala?
I think they'd have to be ready to deal with moving forward as being rural, but keeping that character of being rural and moving into that economic development.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, Mrs. Carter.
Hi, Jenny, how are you? Good. I've said that 100 times over, that the work on the Parks Board is thankless and so needed. So thank you. And not just for that, I mean, I know you guys are involved in a number of things. And with that, in that experience of volunteering throughout the city and not just with the parks, aside from our parks and obviously development, as a council person, what would you see as one of the main issues as an at-large council person that you would want to bring to light that you don't feel like has been given enough attention?
I would hope that representing all of Pataskala, being at large, that I would try and engage with homeowners associations and try and get more involved in figuring out what everyone needs and be loyal to everyone. I think that one of the good traits of being a city council member is to be able to listen and be respectful, listening to and weighing different opinions. I would hope that I could determine and listen and make what's best for everyone as city and whole, and not just my neighbor or my friends.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walther?
So I have kind of a question that goes along with that, and it's kind of an interesting thought as I was going through everybody's questionnaire, and it's a basic question. What do you feel is the number one responsibility of a council person? What's our number one job? What do we do, for the city? And maybe that's very reflective anyhow from my point of view, but what is our number one job?
Well, I think the city is much like a manager of any business, and you have to decide how to spend the money and do it wisely.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Ashbrook?
I just have a quick one. Was I last one? Okay. Are you still working with Pataskla Meats?
I am
Okay. And how many hours do you work there a week?
more than probably most people want to know. But
Legally or illegally?
we're working on. We just hired some weekend help, so I am getting away from doing the
Fine.
50-hour weeks.
I know you put a lot of hours in with the Lions Club, and if you're working full-time, will you still have time for council? And
Yes, we worked very hard on trying to train some new people at work, and I wouldn't be applying if I didn't think I had the time. And that's something that, if you give me a task, I'll get it done. There's never, I don't tend to leave things pushed aside, so.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Ashbrook? Okay, Ms. Ashbrook, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Browring?
Mr. Broering, all right. Just give us your name and address, please, sir. Thank you, and then give us a little intro when you get done with that.
All right. My name is Frank Browring. Address is 5810 Columbia Road Southwest. A little bit about me. I grew up in Mercer County, which you may know where it's at, about 2 hours west of here. Doesn't even have the name of a city, really. Salina's the nearest city, but kind of grew up in a cornfield. Actually live in a similar property kind of right now, but I think Pataskla is awesome. I mean, we've been here since 2014, and I kind of feel like I'm in that same community, but we're still like really close to Columbus and just kind of the best of both worlds from where we're at. So we moved out. We lived in Westerville. That's where my wife's from. In 2014, just wanted some more land. We got 10 acres. We're very fortunate to get that. It was, affordable, and it was just exactly what we're looking for. We've met some neighbors in the area, and it's just a really, really strong community. So very proud to live here, and so that's part of the reason wanting to apply for this position. We've also got 3 young boys, ages 3 to 10, and involved with a lot of things with them as well, with Cub Scouts and karate and church and a bunch of other things. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Oh, man, questions for Mr. Broering? Andy, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned in your question, in your answers to the question, you're attracted due to the rural nature. You just mentioned that again. This is a property rights basic question. As far as large landowners, large tract owners, and where you live, you're adjacent to some large tract owners. How do you feel, or I should say, how would you represent both a residential landowner, say a 10-acre unit,
Yeah.
and a development or a large tract landowner that wants to develop their property into several, maybe 100 homes? Given that you were attracted to Pataskla for its rural nature, do you think those things can coexist?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How would you do that?
It's a challenge, yes. And so, yeah, I mean, part of it, I live here, and there's a lot of people that say you move here, and we were talking about the people who wanted to do the discharge thing. Actually, my neighbor is the guy who owns the 20 acres next to me is looking at. He's been kind of off and on trying to sell that to somebody, and he has to keep it 10 acres because of where we're at. so we're looking at purchasing some of that, so part of that's, in my little sphere of influence, I want to do what I can, but no, but another big interest or concern of mine is just kind of looking forward to where the world's headed. Climate change is something that really concerns me. Energy is something that really concerns me. I learned about it when I was a kid. I'm sure most of you have. Fossil fuels are a limited supply, and so we really have to look at ways to reduce our energy needs. And some of that's things by, just a lot of conservation things. We can make. This is my favorite one of my favorite topics to talk about. But you can make houses that are super insulated. That on the coldest day of the year, you can heat it with energy of a blow dryer, basically. And so, anyhow, I think the way you develop your community, I'm kind of getting rambling. The way you develop your communities, if you have them very walkable, so you don't need to get in the car as much, and kind of have that dense core, and then being able to have the rural on the outside to be able to support it through agriculture, I think's going to be a very, very important direction we need to head in the future. I also read the draft comprehensive plan. I think that looks great. There's not much in there I disagree with as far as what we're proposing in there, and so I think that's a really good direction that we're heading. But I think they can be balanced.
Okay, so if I can
Oh,
just
yeah,
clarify.
Andy, keep going.
What
No.
I was trying to get to is,
Yeah.
okay, so you have a resident, right? We run into situations where there's a resident, there's a large tract owner that's had that land for many years in their family, maybe even many different, handed it down several times. And that resident moves in and they don't want anything to develop there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I guess I'm trying to ask is, what ways can that development occur? Can those two coexist? And I'm talking about essentially buffers. I want to give you a couple ideas that come into usual zoning issues. Buffers and those types of things. That's my first part of the question. So I just wanted to, that's what I was trying to get at with that question. What do you see, how do those two coexist? Or can they?
That's a tough question. I knew I was going to get some tough ones from you.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to get a gotcha
No,
on it,
that's great. No.
but you mentioned it in here, and it's very important to you, obviously, the rural
Yeah.
characteristic, and
Right.
we have pressures on us, and
Yeah.
that's the kind of question we get up here, and that's why I just
No,
felt like it was fair
absolutely.
to ask.
And to be honest, a lot of this is I'm learning a ton of stuff here, and
Okay.
it's great. We've got some great candidates as well. No, I'm just kind of trying to reflect of where, back home, trying to think of what the neighborhood's like, 'cause it's a very strong community back that way. And there are areas that that are being developed there a little bit, but I think it's done with input from the community. What are some other concerns? And I've talked with or been to some of these board meetings, and I've heard a lot of really good ideas as far as just making sure. Really just getting a lot of input from the different people in the area and hearing what their concerns are and trying to address them. And if it's not going to, be a win-win, that for everybody, then that's probably something we should probably look at a little bit more. I really do think the more constraints you put on a design, the better design you're going to have for everybody. And so I think it's really, may not happen very quickly, but I think we can make that work. But you're probably asking very specific as far as what types of
It's
designs.
okay.
So
I don't mean to
don't
be
know if I
specific
can
about it. It's
answer
just
that,
something that we get brought to us quite a bit. So, thank you.
All right.
There's one more.
Oh, Mr.
I
Walther
think-
can't.
I-
Okay,
I think
keep going.
Ms. Carter has a question first.
No.
Go, Mel.
Mrs. Carter, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll give Mr. Walther a rest.
Yeah. Maybe need some water or something. My question, Frank, is aside from, is the maintaining of the rule setting of the city the main thing that drew you to applying for the council seat, or what was your motivation to apply for council?
That's definitely a part of it. I think part of it's just kind of like I have that strong sense of responsibility, and I just want to make sure that whoever gets chosen for these positions here is going to be a good fit. I feel like I can do a good job representing, at least if I'm here to provide a little competition and keep the quality level high. But that's probably the main thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Walther?
I'm good. I'm good.
Sure.
I was going
No.
to talk about technology, but I think we've gone over that a little bit. As far as trying to communicate to our community better with technology, I noticed that you're technology savvy.
Sure.
And just wanted to see if you had any suggestions for us, or
Yes,
that you would suggest if you were up on council. What would you focus on?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I work at a credit union, so we're constantly communicating to our
Absolutely.
members. So, I mean, you have to really attack it from a lot of different directions. There are a lot of millennials in our area, so I mean, Facebook's a great channel there. Having an email newsletter is great, but then you got to also send out paper. I think to some people, I don't know what frequency you do, but I think a quarterly or to some regularity to be able to just get the word out, I think is very helpful.
Great, thanks.
Questions for Mr. Roaring? No?
I'd just like to say thanks for applying, and I know you do a lot of volunteer work with the Cub Scouts and your church, and it's appreciated. So.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Roaring, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good job. We've got 3 left.
Mr. Gaelic. All right, Brandon Gaelic.
Brandon Gaelic, 257 South Main Street. So the reason I applied is I grew up in this community, was raised here. I moved away for a few years, college, moved to Columbus, met my wife, and then we moved back here a couple years ago. I'm actually restoring the home I grew up in, so it's been a current project of mine, but I want to give back to the community that raised me, and then I just want to do what I can.
All right, well, thank you. Questions for Mr. Gaelic? Mr. Hicken.
Brandon, when I was looking at the questions you submitted, number 4, you answered the top issue is building an identity. And you say Pataskala needs to decide, are we going to be small or are we going to explode like Pickerington? And certainly that is absolutely true. What do you personally, what's your personal opinion as to which way we should go?
I lean more small town. I think we need more of a city center, community area, to where you have a gathering space. And I know growth is going to come. I know we're going to have the combination of both housing and what we have now, but I want to keep it on the smaller side as much as we possibly can.
So maybe following up on that just a touch, and this is a little bit along the lines of what Mrs. Carter usually asks, but obviously you're possibly replacing me. I live in the village. How often do you get over to the west side of the city?
Quite a bit. From being in real estate, I'm over there probably 3 times a week. Black Lake, that area, it's one of the most popular areas where people are buying houses right now for me. So.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Gaelic? Mr. Walther?
Can't help it.
Does not disappoint. No.
No. I'm
good
going to
questions.
dovetail
No.
to what
No.
Mr. Hicken said. And first of all, I want to let you know, in being at a few BZA meetings and watching you and the other BZA members conduct themselves, you guys do a fantastic job, and I appreciate all your work that you do on the BZA. I'm going to dovetail to that issue. I noticed also, it stuck right out to me, that identity as being the biggest issue. Now, sometimes it's easy, and this again is not a gotcha question in any way, but it's easy to identify an issue, but how would you, as a council person, how would you propose to resolve that? What steps would we take to come up with an identity that the community would support?
I mean, it's talking with the community and asking what they want. I mean, I know a lot of people I've talked to also along the lines of wanting that smaller hometown feel is why they came out here, for larger lots, more land, and to be close with their neighbors. And that's kind of something that I'm a big advocate of, and that's what I've talked with other people, and that's, you got to talk with the community and see what they want more than anything.
Okay.
Answering your question?
Yep, it does. I was trying to think more of you know, I think of a banner, you know, here's our identity. And how do you, while maybe there'd be a few people that would talk individually, but I'm saying as far as the community banner, how do you say, hey, we're a small town and we're proud of it, for the community to state that, to represent that, to support that?
Right. I mean, I think the design standards and where the comprehensive plan is going with what we want to go moving forward and how we want to look, and I think that's a big first step, and be on the same page and being in unity of what we want. And we can do that when we start making decisions based on having that type of community.
Okay.
All right. Mrs. Carter.
Brandon, obviously, you know, I'm a West Side dweller. What ideas would you have to bridge the west and the east side of town? As I find where people will argue with me, but we're still very disconnected.
Yeah.
And very different. So what would you do, especially if, you know, we need to come up with an identity?
No, I agree with you completely. I think there is a big disconnection between where I live and then, you know, the very west side. And I mean, I think it comes back to making kind of like a meeting area or having events that can connect the two, or coming up with a meeting place over there too that kind of keeps the identity of, you know, the west side. So I think it's kind of a mixture of bringing people together and kind of finding that area to do it.
Mr. Lee, I think had a couple questions.
I just have one. Like Andy said, you know, thank you for your service on the BZA, and I know you're very involved with the church, and you guys got a great thing going there. I'm just curious, what other types of, if there's any other volunteering or anything else that you would like to, you know, is there any other civic organizations that you're interested in, or is there any, growing up here, there's a lot of them. Is there anything else that you?
Yeah, so I started with the Young Leaders of Licking County, started doing that.
Okay.
Patasko Rotary Club, I have a couple of people in there that I'm close with that I want to start doing more with in the street fair and different events that are downtown area where I'm at. And the Cookie Walk's been something, the Patasko Farmers Market, something I want to get involved with. So mostly events are down by my area.
Mr. Barstow, I actually do have one more.
No.
Is that okay?
No.
Just being a realtor, I'm just curious your thoughts on the moratorium.
I was in favor of it, mostly because I thought we had come together as a council, as a city, to know like where we want to go moving forward, and you know, having that design standard and what we want to look like. And I think we needed to have a little time off because we had so many people coming at us all at once, to where we kind of had to figure out what we wanted with the impact fees and what needed to be in place before we started approving or disproving what we wanted. So we had to come together as a city to have that.
Thanks for all you do.
Mr. Walther.
Yep. You know, I know that you have attended several council meetings, and whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But as a member of the BZA, what have you seen as a consistent issue, or an issue that's struck you as something that council needs to deal with, council needs to address, that could fix that from coming to the BZA? Do you have any opinion on an item that sticks out in your mind that, and I'll give you an example of one that we did address, and it was the constant variance for size of barns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was something you guys saw every meeting. So we addressed that. Is there anything else that you see that you're seeing consistently at the BZA?
The biggest thing that sticks out was the discharge zone. We dealt with the Bullet Ranch. I mean, it's one of those things where communicating between both parties and trying to figure out a middle ground. I think that was probably the biggest one that stuck out. I mean, the other thing we've dealt a lot with has been signage and small buildings in the downtown area. I think a majority of what we dealt with has been a bunch of small buildings in the downtown area. It's the one that stick out to me.
And with that, do you think that the council could work closer with the code to help those businesses, our local businesses?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, if it's something that's been seen often and something the majority of people are having issues with, then something we can work with them with.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
All right, any more?
Just a quick follow-up on that issue. What's the line of communications as you see it? Is that the job of BZA to tell council, hey, we've got every month we've got 3 guys in here doing something with signs. Why don't you guys get busy and fix that? And obviously you wouldn't do it quite like that. Or is it the other way around where you think council, it's incumbent on council to keep an eye on that, or the administration to tell council? Just curious.
I think maybe administration. I think there has to be more communication from the BZA level up to city council to kind of know what's going on. So I think it's more on the BZA side of communicating up to council more than the other way around.
Okay, thank you.
All right, more questions, Mr. Galick? All right, Mr. Galick, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Daughtry?
Daugherty.
All right, yeah.
I know, because I mistook her name several times when I called, and she corrected me, so I said I wouldn't forget.
May if you just state your name, please, and your address, and then give us a little intro. Thank you.
Sure. Stephanie Doherty. I'm at 126 Mimosa Drive here in Pataskala. I grew up here. I was born and raised here. I was raised off of Blacks Road, right after York Road. My dad still lives there. Every single child memory I have is in this little city. My kids, raising my kids, it's been here. My kids' best childhood memories, and now my grandkids. So it's sort of a full circle thing. And it's funny, so when I was telling my friends and even my dad, I was like, yeah, I'm going to, interview for this council seat. They're like, why? It's awful. And I'm like, no. They were like, why would you do that to yourself? It's because I love the city. I really do. As an executive, and I've done business development, and I've, really done my homework before opening offices. I understand a lot of the community because, I have so many friends and family here between, I've met so many people just by volunteering my time and all the kids being in school because, I'm a mom of 5. I've got one left at home. He's 15. He comes out of his room sometimes. But in general, I've dedicated a lot of my time to the community just because I've had the kids. I understand what everybody says. I know what the murmurings are. I get it. And I also know that it's going to be 100% impossible to make everyone happy. It's just not going to happen. But keeping the integrity, the small town sort of vibe is, I think, what everybody really wants. I mean, that's why they transplant here. That's why people like me stay here. It would drive me nuts to live in Pickerington. You can't get down the road. It takes you 15 minutes to go to, a mile and a half. I don't want that for here, but I think that careful development, really looking at it logistically and placing things correctly and maybe changing some zoning things for even more developing, making bigger lots. I mean, Pataskala residents love their bonfires and they love playing their music loud, and but they don't necessarily love, being squished in a community. They don't necessarily love, having the school so overcrowded, having too much traffic or having so many potholes, feeling like maybe it would take too long if they had to call the police for them to get there. We've experienced so much growth in a very short amount of time. So I remember when the only grocery store we had was Gardner's. And do you remember? And I remember being 16 years old, and we had our first McDonald's. That was our first fast food place. The Watkins Band played there. They were so excited. We had fast food. So I've watched this development my entire life, and I think that we're really at a critical point right now. And we just need to be careful how we do it. I don't have all the answers. I will tell you that right now, I don't. But I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and dig in and do whatever I need to do to make sure that this little city that I just love with all my heart. It's something that everybody can, even if they can't agree on, they can at least be contented, you know.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Dougherty? I'm probably going to mess that up.
Dougherty.
Dougherty. Okay. Yes. Any questions? Oh, Mr. Hicken, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I every time I run, my wife asks me why. So I certainly feel a kindred spirit there. One of the things that, and by the way, I really liked your answer to number 3, which was, "Are you going to run again?" You were like, "I don't know." It was an honest answer, and that's okay. As I looked through all those, I appreciate that. The follow-up to that, it doesn't have to do with number 3, but I couldn't tell from your resume if you are you employed at the same place that it stops in May.
Well, and then I did some independent consulting. I just didn't update, just because I've spent so many years just as an executive, and I've missed out. I've got grandkids now, so I did reel it in because I had something to prove. I did it, and now it's time to me enjoy life a little bit. But I do independent consulting now, little provider credentialing, things like that. So I have a lot more time. I do want to address what I was saying, though, in 3 with I don't know. So because of the fact that I have an executive background, I'm used to this type of a situation where, you're sitting, well, for me it was a boardroom, board of directors of a hospital, of a psych hospital, I would like to point out.
Perfect for the job.
Yeah, so, no, but
Stop.
When you had said it earlier, you were saying, it can get a little heated. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's not, I'm used to the situation where everybody has something to bring to the table. Not everybody's going to agree. You can even have, the peanut gallery, out here really throwing some shade your way. And you just have to be able to say, I get it, I understand, I know why you're upset, but we still have to be productive. So when I said that I don't know if I would run again, that would be dependent on how much we could get done. Because I won't sit in a seat when the mix doesn't work, right? And you're not productive. It's not going to help anybody. It's a waste of time. So because I've been in those types of situations, but I've also been in the types of situations when, you're sitting in a boardroom with, people that are not necessarily like-minded, but understand and respect each other's, and then they can say, okay, let's move forward. You're decisive. You understand the entire picture. If you don't, you're willing to figure it out. Because like I said, I don't have all the answers. But then again, I never have. But
Well, and essentially that is, you said it depends on whether or not I feel I'm contributing in a positive way.
Right.
And that's exactly what you just said right there. So let the record reflect that.
Any other questions? Mr. Walther?
So I also reviewed your answers. I felt, I saw SWAT, and I had to go find out what that was.
no, I should have put it in there.
Well, I
I'm sorry.
got it. I think it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I kind of figured it out. I had to decipher a little bit. But so I'm very interested to understand how that applies to development. And what you think of a threat as far as development is concerned, maybe what you think of as opportunities as development is concerned.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and address the threat piece, okay? So I do think that cluster housing is a threat to your development, and I'll tell you why. And that's another reason that I put development as number one as far as the issue goes, because the way this develops affects everything else. And I feel like right now, even though I love the fact that people want to live in our community, I really do. But we have a finite budget. Like you were saying, okay, here's $100. Now, go ahead and allocate that. The development with the housing, the cluster housing, it just taxes everything. It puts too much on our utility structure. It puts too much on our police department. I mean, our roads. It affects everything. Now, if we were looking at business development, it's a different thing. You know, we only have so much land, and we have to figure out what we're going to put on it. So whether that's cluster housing, whether that's condo housing, whether that's businesses, and I liked your point about Facebook because that's true. Even if it wasn't a Facebook or a Google, put it on the fringes. We can still keep the integrity of our town. We have a beautiful Main Street. I love the Creekside idea. I can envision these things on the outskirts, beautiful storefronts. You know, nothing fancy, not New Albany or anything, but, you know, something that reflects the personality of this community, which is a diverse community, too. It's a very diverse community. But we could do this on the fringes, and we can make money from these businesses coming in. You can't look at a farmer and say, sorry, buddy, you can't sell to a developer, right? You can't tell them where they can sell their land to or who they can sell their land to. But maybe zoning can say, okay, we're not doing these houses on top of each other. They can be larger lots. And these people, yes, it's going to be more expensive to buy. But, you know, I think we've already proven, I pay $1,600 a month for my condo, okay? People's willing to pay this money to live here for a reason. But places, you know, these neighborhoods popping up where you can look right out your door or your window and you can see into the neighbor's window, that's what people don't really want here as much of, you know? I don't know if I answered that
You did.
question.
I think,
For the
so I got to
opportunity
interpret that as saying the opportunities are businesses and
Yes.
companies
And
bringing.
in larger lots.
Right.
Like
And
Beechwood Trails even has, you know, how
So
it is.
I'm going to just add one thing to that. As you bring those companies and businesses in that we want to have supplying the income tax and paying a portion of the budget, that brings people. And one of the first questions I imagine as an executive, you know this, that one of the first questions that a company will ask is, do you have the resources? And resources are people. Do you have the resources to relocate there? So given a large company coming in and they say, well, that's wonderful, but you just don't have enough people to support our 2,000 employees that we're going to be bringing in, because that's really what is going to be driving the budget. You know, if you want to really take the burden off of the residents back, you got to get, this is just my opinion, but you got to get companies to come in. How do you've got to balance opportunities with threats, as I understand your write-up. How would you do that, given that, you know, if you look in the draft, there's over 8,000 acres of developable property in Pataskala right now. So how do you balance that? How would you propose to balance that on council? And if you don't have that answer, and I'm okay with that, I'm just saying that's one of the issues we're dealing with.
I don't have the answer, but I could spitball an answer.
Okay, good.
Okay, so, again, I'm not opposed to multifamily, like condos, apartments on certain lots of land or whatever. Also, Pataskala is so close to Reynoldsburg. You could sell that in a minute. Or I could sell that in a minute. If I were sitting down with Google and I would say 10 minutes up the road is this and 10 minutes up the road is this, we're really centrally located. 70 isn't far, 161 isn't far. And really, if you're looking at it, they're going to look at us and say, okay, what about a 20-minute radius? They're not going to say.
That's exactly what they do. 10-minute radiuses, 20-minute radiuses, that's exactly what they do.
It doesn't have to be in our town. It could be within 20 minutes, and we're located to close to 2 different freeways. So you could still sell that without saying, I have 300,000 homes that we could do right here in Pataskala. You know what I mean?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Doherty?
Did have one more.
Sure, Andy.
Thanks. So I noticed you ranked police third on your list, in your answer, third out of the 5 that were given. What drove you, living here your entire life, and obviously seeing the increase in development and so forth, and the demands on the police, when you put them third and you put the other ones in front of that, what was your reasoning behind that?
Well, it was like a gentleman said a little while ago. I
You could have
couldn't
them
put
all
everything
first?
on yeah. But secondarily, I know they have limited resources, but I also know they do a hell of a job.
Okay.
I know I could call 911, and they would be a policeman at my door quickly because they are so good at what they do. And we do have a great police force.
Absolutely right.
So-
That's exactly what I wrote down here. Do you think that they're doing a fabulous job
They
now?
really are.
Not that that's going to stay in that level. We have to look to increase.
When we grow, we're
Yep.
going to need to grow them as well.
Fair enough, fair
But,
enough.
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Doherty, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. No, wait, I'm sorry. I see.
Andy took my question, but I just wanted to tell you that I wanted to thank you. I love your passion for the community. I grew up, been here my whole life too, and
Yeah,
just
so you know.
I love that. That's a huge part of this. So thank you for that, and your volunteering as well too with the PTO and the youth football
Yes.
and cheer.
I still will. I still have another kid. I'll be doing it some more until I have any, I guess.
Thank you. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Free time? Do you have free time?
Okay, so I'm a mother of 5, so multitasking is my superpower. But again, though, like I said, I reeled it in. I was an executive. I was running multi-million-dollar healthcare companies and developing and growing, and still never missed a football game, and still never missed a PTO meeting or anything that I had to do, because it's about my obligations and it's about my kids, it's about my community. So the things you love, you make time for, and that's just the way it is.
All right,
So,
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
No? Okay, thank you.
There's only one
Okay,
left.
there's only one left,
There's
but
only
I've
one
been keeping track, and I want, just to show that this was on the up and up, so, okay. Yes.
This Hampshire.
Oh, I thought you were going to say somebody else's name and leave. What happened? So, Ms. Hampshire, please come up. Your name and address, please, and just give us a little intro. Thank you.
I'm Jude Hampshire, 13318 Havens Corners Road. I don't know, I might be at a disadvantage going last, but it was nice to kind of put another Beatles song, number 9, instead of Hey Jude, but, maybe something you guys didn't know about me. I'm the middle of 9 children, so I am a very good negotiator. I have an older set of brothers and sisters. I'm in the middle set, and I have a younger set of brothers and sisters. And I will tell you that my oldest set of brothers and sisters have grudges going back to the 60s. So, I feel it.
Any questions for Ms. Hampshire? Mel? Oh, go ahead.
So you and I, in weirdly different ways, travel all the same areas. It's a strange thing. So I know when I think about when I close my eyes about and picture what I want to see the city look like. Because I always said, it's an avalanche coming, and if we don't control the growth, it's going to control us. So when you close your eyes, what do you see?
What I see for Pataskala is kind of different than what most people see. I had the right to come here and to live how I want to live, and anyone else has the right to do that as well. And if that means an apartment or a condo or a mobile home, then that's what it means. And regardless of someone living in a $500,000 house out here or someone living in a camper they paid cash for, we all get to live in Pataskala how we choose and where we choose. So I see it just being a place where people want to come and call home and do what they do on their property, if they're lucky enough to keep it that way that they want it to be. Sometimes you choose a nice country setting and a big road comes down through there, or sometimes you choose a area that's a little more crowded and everybody leaves. So you just have to hope that what you see and what you want is what you end up with. And because I was able to do that, I hope that others can do that as well, whatever that might be.
What about on the side of development as far with businesses?
businesses and residential go hand in hand. You're going to have one and you're going to have the other. If you're lucky, they balance each other out, but that's usually not the case. You usually get an avalanche of one, and then the others try to catch up to follow. What I've always liked about Pataskala is the mom and pop businesses and organizations, but you have to have the other things like your Starbucks and your McDonald's in order to draw in younger people too. So I hope we can balance that out.
Mr. Hicken?
In one of your answers, you, I think, encapsulated a lot of the conundrum that we have to deal with on a regular basis. You know, it's the answer is, how do we keep a business, how do we keep mom and pop businesses, but still allow big box stores? And how do we, you know, make our fire and police work right, you know, but still be quaint? And I think you list what those questions are. So I'm going to flip one of your answers around, and I'm going to say do we continue to build complexes and subdivisions to allow growth when it cuts into farms and wetlands? What would your answer be to that?
Well, if that's what people want or what people are buying, then yes, we do, as long as it's zoned or allowed. We can only do what we can do. Do I hope that all of that stuff comes down Havens Corners? Absolutely not. But I have lived other places than single-family homes, and I have lived a few other places than Pataskala. I actually lived in a subdivision in Pataskala before we moved further out into the country. We did not fit in there so well as, you know, and not everybody fits into what they think they're going to fit into or what they choose, and sometimes you have to make a decision and choose something else. But you can't completely cut off one type of building or business to hope to get another type, because you might end up without both.
As a council person, sometimes, not sometimes, we all, and quite often, have to wrestle with that question. How are you going to gauge what the public's opinion is? Is it? I mean, I don't have the answer. I'm just seeing if maybe you have some insight as to where your finger's on the pulse of.
Really just listening. Social media seems to be the way that a lot of people communicate, although not always the best words for communicating what they actually mean. But social media has as many goods as bads these days. So you just kind of have to listen when people talk, pay attention when you're in the groups that you're in, and hear what people are saying. And like a couple other people said, you're never going to please everybody. And if you're very lucky, you please one more person than you don't please.
Any questions for Ms. Hampshire? Yeah, Mr. Lee.
First, a comment. As I was looking through your questions, I see the half page of volunteering and things you're involved in. It makes me feel like I need to step up my game. And you do that all with 5 kids? Is that right?
Oh, no. I probably have the least kids here. I have 3, but
3
all
kids.
boys in 3 years.
Okay.
3 boys in 3 years. So
Anyway, yeah. That's impressive, very impressive, and thank you for that. I'm just curious. I know you're involved in a lot of things, and I've seen you at council meetings, but we've talked about the moratorium. I didn't know if you were familiar with that, and if you are, what's your thoughts on it?
I believe everybody who's been asked so far has said, and I feel the same way, I was for it. I believe that sometimes you just kind of have to stop what you're doing and assess where you're at and dig your feet in and figure out where you want to go from there. And so
Okay, thank you.
I appreciated it.
Okay.
Mr. Walther.
Good evening. As on the board of directors of Explorer Licking County, I'd be interested, as you meet people that have not experienced Pataskala, and I do call it an experience, what do you tell them as the number one thing or number one favorite thought of Pataskala from your viewpoint?
I love Pataskala. Pataskala is my home. It is the most beautiful place to live. And if they don't believe me, I will show them.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the other side of it. And I hope nobody asked you this. But if you said, what's your least favorite thing about Pataskala?
There are people who will say to me, I used to live in Pataskala, I couldn't wait to get out of there. It stuns me. It stuns me because.
I hear that also.
Yeah, I
do.
hear it. People have the right to go wherever they want to go. And generally what you'll hear from someone is something not even true of Pataskala. It was just a vibe that they felt or a pull to somewhere else.
Can I ask Todd just to?
Sure,
follow
go
up
ahead.
on that? So given that you're on the Explore Licking County, and I know you're the number one cheerleader on that for Pataskala, I guarantee it. How do we convince people? How does the city convince people, the community convince people that Pataskala is worth, first of all, living here? The people that have left and say, I can't wait to get out of there. Those things that they mention, to me at least, and I'm sure they mentioned to you. How do we get to the point where we don't have necessarily that happening very often, in your mind?
It was mentioned with a couple of other people, maybe have a brand or an identity or a slogan or and a banner, like you said, what we're known for. We are not necessarily known for much. On the Board of Directors for Explore Licking County, always my hand is up. As soon as they say, can someone, I raise my hand before they even finish. How do I know what they're going to say? So I'm an advocate for Pataskala. I want everyone to be as happy in their home as I am here in my home, Pataskala. Okay. So I bring it up, talk about it, send people pictures. I've made all of you guys pictures. Oh, yeah. Talking about it, inviting people. I invite the Board of Directors to have a meeting in Pataskala every month, and they haven't yet, but I invite them. I want them here. Come to Pataskala. I go to Newark all the time for their meetings. Why can't they come here? And they know I'm offering, and they know that I want them there. So if I want that group of people that I've been forced upon there, imagine what it would be if I had a whole group of people who were saying, we're going to move somewhere. Where should it be? I'd be talking right in front of them. I'd be the first one with my hand in the air. Why you come to Pataskala? Why it's been wonderful. Why I've raised 3 sons here. Why I haven't hardly needed the police department at all while raising 3 sons here. What is good about it? Could be good anywhere, but it's good here.
You are the number one cheerleader. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, just a quick comment. Thank you for your work with Explore Licking County. I enjoyed the shindig this year, and also I appreciate your work in the Lions Club, working your way up from a member to currently president. So thank you. Nothing else.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Hampshire. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that concludes the interview portion, and so now I am looking for a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22 G1 to consider the appointment of public officials and fill the 2 vacancies of council.
Moved by Mr. Hicken and second by Mr. Lee. Kathy, roll, please.
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
Barstow,
Nope.
Hicken,
Yes?
Lee,
Yes.
Motion passes executive session at 7:58. And invited into the section is Mayor Compton and Mr. Zetz. Mr. Zetz isn't here, so we'll be upstairs for a while. Make nice amongst yourselves. Don't drink anything that somebody else offers you. We'll be back. Thank you.
You're a mess.
Cheers.
Nor did I.
Are you telling jokes again?
I said about 45 minutes ago. We've been doing improv down here.
Well, we turned the heat on now, so, okay. All right, we got everybody here. Timmy's so nice. Okay, so I need a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Carter, second by Mr. Walther. Kathy, roll please on the motion.
Walter,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Okay, out of executive session at 9:14. So we had a very productive executive session. It was very good. I just want to say I'm an attorney. I do a lot of trial work, and waiting for juries is not fun. So I do sympathize with you on that regard. So I have to say, we are very, very impressed with the high quality of the applicants, and we are very, very pleased with, again, with the high quality and your passion for the city and your backgrounds. It's really, really was very, very competitive. And so, again, I can't say that enough. When Mr. Walther applied, when we put Mr. Walther on, we had an equally strong group of applicants. So again, as Mr. Hicken and I said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit more here, and we'll see if we can get some nominations. But if you're not selected, we would encourage all of you to continue to be involved in city affairs. We have boards and commissions and things and openings, so we would encourage that. So having said that, I promised I'd be brief, so we're just going to go around the room and have some discussion. So Mrs. Carter, first, please.
First off, I just want to thank all of you for the marathon meeting for this. I don't think we've ever had this many applicants for a vacant council seat, and especially this many qualified applicants that while I was made fun of, I have tabbed and noted and, trying to be prepared for this evening, so we weren't here until 9:30. I will tell you that I understand the pain of, I sat in an audience once for an executive session at a board meeting that was 3 hours long. So I'm sorry to keep you waiting down here. This is a difficult process. I'm going to tell you as I've been on council for 6 years. The first 2 years of my council, I was appointed to serve the unfilled term of mayor who left a council seat when he was elected. So I've been through the interview process. I understand how that goes. And then I ran for election. And then again here recently. So having been here in that time and knowing how complex the decisions can be and all the things that go into it, my personal decisions for who I would nominate, if I nominate someone tonight, will be community involvement's very important to me. I think it's important that you're in touch with, that you have your pulse on something so you can have a base to reach out to. Oftentimes, I found that we've been up here and engaged in debate and exchange, and I've thought this is really important. And then when I've reached out to somebody who's, normal home having dinner with their family while we're in here, carrying on, that's not how they see it at all, or that's not what's important to them. So it's really important to learn how to step back and say, am I making decisions, in my whole, or am I really reaching out and representing who I should be? So having a base that you can reach out to is something that's really important in this role. The second part for me that's really important is I live on the west side of town. And I work with a fabulous group of people who, whether you are a ward representative or an at-large, we sit in here and make decisions for the entire city. And we all do that with 100% intent to serve the best for the entire city. So when I say I serve and live on the west side of town, my point with that is I have a specific viewpoint that maybe Mr. Hicken wouldn't have because he lives on the east side. So while Mr. Hicken travels an intersection that I don't travel every day, the same is true for me over there. The difference for me on this council is that I travel intersections that nobody else travels. So it's very important for me that my constituents on the west side of town have another person who sees things that they would see. So they can bring up those points, because I can't see everything. So what if my question to myself is always, am I fighting the right fights? Am I seeing what other people need me to see, because I'm one, and where I need others to do the same? That's why I'm always encouraging people, please come in and speak to the council so we know where you're at, and we make sure that we're doing what, the citizens really need done every day. So it's very important to me that I have another person who, which makes it really hard when you have such great candidates across the board, who gets some of the perspectives across the other side of town that I would, so I'm not alone in that, and somebody else can help me out with that. So sorry that was lengthier than I anticipated, but I really wanted to let you guys help you understand that I really hope that should you not be nominated or on a seat, please watch. We have board seats and commission seats open all the time. And those individuals, we need people who have these kinds of resumes to serve in those roles, to help us with that perspective in other places, because those are in place to serve a different demographic that, we don't do. So, and then you never know where that will lead. So please don't be discouraged, but stay in tune so you can participate in other areas should you not, fill one of the council seats. And I'll stop talking now, Mr. President.
Sure. Mr. Hicken.
I'll echo a lot of what Mrs. Carter said. I was coming in here tonight. I wanted to see via the interview process who was going to hit the ground running. Maybe somebody with a history of the city. I have a heavy nod towards what having been an at-large person that tried to represent both sides of the city. So the geographical stuff carried some weight with me. And then I was kind of hoping volunteerism might make the cream come to the top. But when you look at your guys' and gals' resumes, we've got coaches and chamber presidents and a Mrs. Claus and the popcorn colonel. So we literally have all these people that have done a significant amount of volunteerism. True testimony to everybody that's out there tonight. So I think I know in the end where I fall with my vote, and we'll see how it goes. But thank you to everybody, and I certainly echo the comments that it said. If you don't make it, it's not because we didn't think you were good. So,
again, those things are important to me. Were community involvement. I also looking at electability, having run at large twice here in town, folks who would be strong in that area. Geographical diversity. Even though I live on as far east in the city as you can get, I can walk out my neighborhood. I'm in Harrison Township on three sides. So that was important. I didn't ask a lot of questions, mainly because I'm kind of a one-trick pony, and I was having trouble enough running the meeting to then start asking a lot of questions, so I let my fellow council members do that. But I was observing, and important to me was presentation at the podium. As you can see, this is a public job, and being able to present well and articulate well, to me, is really important. So those are some of the factors that I had in mind as we were going through the interview. So that's what I have. Mr. Walther.
Well, you guys are probably all out there, and I'm sure the discussion while we were gone was that Mr. Walther asked a lot of frickin' questions. I'll tell you why. When I reviewed the resumes and the answers to the questions, some of you I've never talked to before, and it was my honor to actually talk to you. And I wanted to it wasn't that I needed to know who you were. I wanted to know your ideas. You obviously put your name in for a reason. You're all very articulate to the importance of the city, the problems that are facing the city, the benefits of being here. I echo every one of your comments. I've heard, but your ideas, you probably gleaned from my questions, communication to the community has been one of my biggest things that I think that we fall down Development questions, obviously, a lot of my questions to each one of you were about that. Funding, the budget, the nominees, the successful candidates will be here, and believe me, you will be up to your eyeballs in budget issues. It is, how do we stretch $1 to pay for $5 worth of stuff? It just is the way it is. It's the same as in every household, I'm sure. But what I guess I wanted to say in general was my criteria for my decision will be twofold. One will be the ability to work with the people that are up here, and believe me, I'm probably the one person that is the person putting the other side of the coin. I try to look under every rock. I try to look at the other side of the coin, and sometimes to the point where we get into some pretty heavy debates about things, and it's not personal. And so I was trying to get some understanding that that the candidates that I'd like to work with up here understand that it's not about me, it's not about Tommy, it's not about us, it's about the community, and differentiate, saying that you can walk out of a room and still be perfectly fine because you did what you thought was right for the community. It's not personal. It's important that that message is out there. And I didn't, everybody. So with that, you all answered the questions very well, and I really mean this sincerely. I hope to talk to all of you again, no matter who is on council and who is not. I come to P&Z meetings, I come to BZA meetings, I come to Park Board meetings. I want to talk to you. And I think you guys are all fantastic candidates for any of those seats, including the council seats. My final criteria will be that I'm hopeful that we stay a diverse group up here, that we represent the entities that represent Pataskala, which is many and several, including the 5% that never agree with anything. And you're absolutely right. There is a group that never agrees with anything, and you have to learn to live with that, and thick skin is a criteria. So thank you very much, everyone. And I mean it. I do hope to talk to all of you again, and please reach out to me to talk to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Walter. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, this is a tough one. There's people out there that I know. There's people out there that I don't. And I think the amount of time that we spend upstairs is a testament to the quality of the group that we have. When I came on council, it didn't take long for me to have to, I think, Andy, you were the first one up, and, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and I just ask from all of you that please don't take it personal if you're not chosen, because I can remember one person that was a very qualified candidate against you that I'd known for my entire life that was mad at me for 6 months, and it hurts you, you don't want that to be that way, because it's just, there's so many good people. And I encourage you to get on these boards, and if I don't know you, I agree with Andy, I want to know you, because everybody here is just such high quality. You can always call me for anything. I don't care if you're in my ward or not. I'm just super, super impressed with what we have, and it's a very difficult decision. So I'm going to wrap this up by giving you guys what my criteria was. And a lot of them, like, when you think about, character and personality, everybody here's got that. So that's just right out of the gates. It's already done with everybody checks that box. Cohesiveness amongst council, I feel like I could work with anyone sitting here. So it came down to me, the three things was geography is important. We have one person up here that represents the west side, and, we all live this way. That's not a personal thing. I don't believe that's fair to the whole of the city. I feel like it's fair to the whole of the city to give them more of a voice on the west side. That's one criteria. Community service is big for me. I like to think that I've invested a lot of time in that, like we all have, but it's huge for me. And also another part of it is, have you served on a board? I think that while that's by no means a disqualification, but I think the institutional knowledge that you gain from serving on a board within the city. It's very helpful, and I say that because when I came on council, I hadn't been on a board, and I see where it'd be beneficial. When it comes down to all the development questions and everything that Andy and everybody, we all kind of ask those, they're very important. But to me, I had none of that when I came on. You learn that through time, and I think every single one of you sitting here could do the same. So you kind of take that out of it. So I didn't expect to talk this long either, but it's very important for me to put that out there because I think so highly of this group, and I just it's a tough decision. So I'll leave it at that.
I think the mayor has some very brief comments.
I do, very brief. First of all, thank you all. I think it's a testament to the city how far we've come to see this group, and I know Melissa will be the first one to say, because and all quality also. And as the mayor, I don't vote on a regular basis, but I do have to keep intertwined with everything that's going on because I do break ties. So it's not like I just sit up here and run a meeting. I have to be included and know what I'm doing so that if that time ever came up. So I need to be working, and we've got a great council. And so, being involved tonight was important because I'm going to be working with you too. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so time has come. So does any council member have a nomination for the first opening?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Lee.
Sorry, Mr. President, not Mr.
Mr. Lee.
Again, great group, but I'd like to make a motion to nominate Mr. Dustin Epperson.
Okay, we have a motion for Mr. Epperson. Have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Walther. So motion and seconded. Kathy, call the roll, please.
Walther,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Epperson. You are the 6th member of council. Did he stick around? I couldn't see him. Okay, come on up.
Did he stick around? Did he leave?
Come on up.
Are you sure?
You want the certificates printed up before?
Well, if you can do Mr. If yeah,
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do this now and go ahead and see them. Yes, so I need.
yeah. I'll talk to Kathy.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. I feel better now. I was shivering upstairs.
You need the certificate? You have it memorized?
Let me see if I have one. I think I have one here.
You know what? I saw one on your desk.
I got mine if you need
Tommy
it.
has his. I saw it earlier tonight.
I have it right here.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, right hand in the air, left hand on the Bible.
You're fine.
You ready, sir?
Got it right.
I state your name.
I, Dustin Epperson,
Do solemnly and sincerely
do solemnly and sincerely
promise and swear
promise and swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will conform to
that I will conform to
and uphold
and uphold
the Constitution
the Constitution
of both the United States of America
of both the United States of America
and the state of Ohio,
and the state of Ohio,
and will support the charter
and will support the charter
and all ordinances
and all ordinances
and resolutions
and resolutions
of the city
of the city
of Pataskala, Ohio.
Pataskala, Ohio.
I will be loyal
I will be loyal
and with strict adherence
and with strict adherence
obey the duties of my office
obey the duties of my office
set forth by law
set forth by law
and the will of the citizens
and the will of the citizens
of the great city
of the great city
of Pataskala, Ohio.
Pataskala, Ohio.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome.
Congratulations, Mr. Epperson. Great.
Congratulations.
Okay, so does I'm going to ask for this. Do I have a motion to go back into executive session?
Is there a discussion before the motion would happen?
We can have a discussion.
I think.
Mr.
So-
Walther?
So essentially, as a new council member, I would just ask if there is, if you will be asked to either, I think, and President and Vice President had explained this, that there's a couple choices here. You can vote or abstain. If you feel comfortable with the next decision, that's going to either be, it could be multiple nominations and multiple votes, or it could be one. I don't know, I can't tell you how it's going to happen, but the question I guess I would ask you is, as a new member here, would you feel more comfortable having a chance to discuss this in executive session, as we have had, and trust me, I'm not trying to make this a longer night for anybody, but as a courtesy to you being a new council member, I would ask you the question, do you feel comfortable making the vote? Do you feel comfortable, or do you prefer to go up into executive session, or would you, do you feel that, you don't need to do that, is I guess what I'm saying.
Mr. Walther, I appreciate the offer and the chance and the courtesy. However, I think I'm good to go.
Okay, very good.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Walther, for explaining that very well. I appreciate it. So I'm going to, there's not going to be, I don't believe there's going to be, I'm going to ask again, is there a motion to go into executive session? Going once, going twice, 3 times, no motion. Okay, does a member of council have another nomination for the second seat? Mr. Hicken.
Mr. President, I would make a motion to nominate Jude Hampshire.
Okay, we have a motion for Ms. Hampshire. To have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Carter. Kathy, would you call the roll, please? Yes.
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 Congratulations, Ms. Hampshire. You are the 7th member of
Hold on a
Pataskala
second,
City Council.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry. Oh, Mr. Epperson, see, you said you didn't forgot all about you. Mr. Epperson, I'm sorry. Okay, you haven't done the roll yet, Kathy?
Abstain.
Okay. Congratulations, Ms. Hampshire. You are the 7th member of the Pataskala City Council, and I do apologize. Sorry, Mr. Epperson.
Nothing personal.
Last chance to run.
I, Jude Hampshire, do solemnly and sincerely promise.
Do solemnly and sincerely
Sincerely promise. Swear or affirm. Support the charter. And all ordinances. And resolutions. Of the city of Pataskala, Ohio. I will be loyal. And with strict adherence. Obey the duties of my office. Set forth by law. And the will of the citizens. Of the great city. Of Pataskala, Ohio.
So help me God.
All right.
Right down there next to Mr. Walther. Yes.
You sit on the good-looking side.
Split those two up.
Looks like we should have some music or something. A little drum roll or something. All right, Mr. Barstow.
Well, this is a pleasure. I'm going to turn this back over to the mayor.
Okay, well. I think we're just going to go around the room real quick because this was an exciting evening. So, Mr. Epperson, do you have anything to say, sir?
Thank you. Everyone, appreciate the time. Appreciate, it was stiff competition amongst all the candidates. And I'd like to echo fellow council members now to, please apply for these commissions and boards. I was on a commission for a few years, and that experience garners a lot when it comes to knowing how the city works and how it operates, and it's very beneficial. So, again, thank you.
Very good. Mrs. Carter?
Okay, I promise I won't make it long.
Okay.
I'm not usually super long-winded, but I have to share with you guys real quick. The night I was sworn into council, when I was appointed, was a regular council meeting. We didn't have a special one just for this purpose. And the first thing they did on the agenda was interview us, and there was only 2 of us. And the questions, and it got quite, it got a little crazy. And so after we sat down, they allowed citizens' comments before they voted. And a gentleman got up with rope around his, 10 foot of huge rope around his shoulder and said, I've come here to give you guys enough rope to hang yourselves with. And I sat out there and thought, oh my God, maybe they'll pick the other person. What am I doing? And they did it. And here I am still 6 years later. So we have come such a long way from the way that particular meeting went with the questions being asked to how this has gone and the level of candidates and the fact that we I had to label and tab and make notes. So I am really just grateful that that we have so many people interested in being part of this, because all of us won't be here forever. And so please, we need you to stay involved. So thank you so much. And congratulations to my new council members.
Mr. Hicken?
I'm honored to serve with these 2 new individuals. I'm also honored to live in a city where the choice was so difficult. And I'll let it sit at that. Thank you, everybody.
And welcome. Mr. Barstow?
It was a very difficult choice. And again, stay involved. I think with Mr. Epperson's selection, we've created a vacancy on a board, so that'll be announced, will be out there. We have an announcements coming out for the Personnel Board of Review. Stay involved, and the filing deadline for these 3 seats is August of 2021, so mark that on your calendar if you want to run. I think somebody said stiff competition, so stay involved and stay active. We have a lot of great people. We need people who are willing to step up and devote their time, and it does take some time. To the 2 new members, I'm going to give you Mr. Hicken's card with his email address on it. You please, as soon as you can, send us any preferences that you have for committee service. Mr. Hicken and I are meeting on Friday at 7 a.m. to make committee assignments, so please get those to us. If you need a list of committees, Kathy can get those for you. Make sure you see Kathy before you leave so she can get you hooked up with email addresses and things like that. Talk to BJ. So we do that. We can get you on board because we do have a lot of communication by email. Again, congratulations to two new council members, even though I ignored Mr. Epperson. I won't do that again. But again, congratulations, folks. Thanks for coming out. It's difficult to come out and apply and go through the process and then sit and wait. So we appreciate it. Stay involved. Thank you.
I just want to say again, thank you and congratulations. And also, again, thanks to Councilman Hicken for the preliminary questions. I think that was a genius move to, again, give us some information and also to let you see how the process works. And because if we'd have tried to go through all of that tonight, it'd be another 3 or 4 hours. I mean, let's just face it. So very good job, both of you, on the icebreaker and also the pre-questions. That was excellent. So, and again, congratulations. And thank you again. Keep trying because there's always stuff happening in Pataskala. Mr. Walter?
A couple different things. I say this to the new council members. Sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for. You'll be amazed on how much work there really is in this, and it isn't. You're not doing this for the pay. Trust me on that one. So I hope that what we said prior to the having you guys join us. We really meant it. This is about the community, and you get yelled at, you get thanked, and you get to get home on Monday nights at about 10 o'clock. So it gets to be, and that's not counting the committee meetings. So be careful that you ask for this. Secondly, Ms. Dowdry, I want to tell you, you are a superhero. I will tell you that right now, and I wish that I hope to sit down and talk with you about the community and being a lifelong member here. Your superpowers they wowed me. That's all I can say. And I don't mean to single out any one person, but I had never met you before. I'd never talked to you before. I did not get from your answers what your presentation was, and there's a lot of people in Pataskala that we don't get to meet, we don't get to talk to, and so this to me was worth every minute of being here. So thank you, and thank you to everybody else. I truly appreciate your time and effort.
Councilwoman Jude.
I just wanted to say thanks for everybody. I did come out and try this a couple years ago when you got on, and you all gave me some valuable advice, and apparently I took it and ran with it. So thank you, everybody. It was nice meeting all of you guys, too. It was great. Thank you.
Tommy Lee, take us home.
Yeah, well, congrats to both of you, and again, thank you to all. I echo Andy's comment. I've never met you. I can't believe, but your passion for the community just it was phenomenal. I hope if you need anything to any of you, reach out. But for those, again, I'll say it one more time and I'll wrap it up. But if I don't know you, feel free to reach out, or I'll try and do the same. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Barstow. Discussion and roll.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
We got Epperson, right? Okay,
Yeah,
very
we got
good.
everybody.
Meeting adjourned.
So, Mr. Epperson and Ms. Hampshire, well, I'll ask you every night to put your chair down.
Chairs down.
Look, I get made fun of this, but the arms
I
hit
would
the
also-
things, and when I did president, like, what was that, a year or two ago? I got new chairs because it sucked.
I would also say, Ms. Hampshire and Mr. Epperson, make sure you talk to Kathy